Welcome to our CS410 presentation. My name is Aaron Blythe,
And I'm Dan Barker.
and we're going to show you our Twitter sentiment analysis of companies across an industry. The industry that we chose to do for our initial analysis is the airline industry. We know that people use Twitter quite a bit to complain about airlines, so we wanted to see across different companies what that actually looks like. So here we have different companies like Alaska Air, Allegiant, American Air, and what we see is the sentiment of tweets that are out there on a scale from negative to neutral to positive. And the way our scale works is it goes from purple to blue to green, and green is actually the positive ones. One thing that we noticed was that there are some of the smaller airlines like the LATAM and Mesa Airlines that don't operate in as many places, so we see a lot more of the gray, and the gray means that we didn't find any tweets in the corpus of data that we gathered from that location.
Yeah, we also noticed that the different headquarters of each airline, those states are not the highest rated. They usually fall somewhere in the middle, so they don't really like their airline, and they also don't hate their airline. But that was kind of interesting. I expected to find that they would really like their airline. We also noticed that you can see Wisconsin in the green, and they were pretty positive about every single airline, or they didn't have an opinion, which we thought was kind of interesting. We also found that Delta overall had the highest rating, which correlates with some of the industry metrics on customer service, and that Delta has held that top spot for a while. So it was interesting to validate our sentiment analysis with an external party.
So our code can be found on GitLab.com, and there's a few things you'll need to set up to get started. First, you're going to need a Python environment that's 3x. There's a few things in our code that aren't going to work on Python 2x. For our dependencies, we've provided a requirements.txt file so that you can just pip install all of the requirements. You're also going to need to run the text blob to download the corpora for use with our code. And you'll have to update your Twitter credentials inside of a file. We have an example credentials file that'll have the format. However, we didn't add our credentials into the project because we didn't want to share those out there. We figured that was something that the TA or someone could actually do to test the code. Then to actually test and run the code, there's 3 phases. And what we're doing is we're writing out to text files that are used by the next phase.
And so we decided to use text files because the data was relatively small and we could actually load it all into memory. In the future, as we got more and more data, we would likely be putting that into some sort of object database, just storing it as JSON.
There is a possibility that you'd want to run just one of the companies at a time because we were hitting some timeouts or hitting rate limits, and this is the way we actually ran the data for the actual website that's up and running right now. What we did was we gathered at least 300 tweets from all of the companies. Now, some of the companies weren't even mentioned that many times on Twitter, so that we weren't even returning that many, and that was the LATAM and the Mesa Airlines. We also ran a Django server initially, but we decided to go with a static website, so we used that Django templating to actually deliver the static website. And the static website that we have is what we were just looking at previously, and it's deployed through the use of the pipelines on GitLab.com. We also added in an explanation of how we cleanse the data and a kind of a scale on how you should be able to read this map.
And if you wanted a good use case to test this out with, you could use Twitter handles for universities or something to compare what the sentiment is across the country for each university.
You could even use your own Twitter handle to see how people are viewing you and where they're from.
Again, you may not get the full 300 tweets back about yourself.
So if we had more time, what we would work on is to collect data over a longer period of time and utilize database technology as opposed to the text files utilized for breaking up that we use during development. We'd use Django to make this a little bit more dynamic, and we'd normalize that gradient file. But thank you very much for watching.
Thank you. Bye. In the future, you can just hit the stop button up there.
Oh, please save.
Yeah, I know, right? Whew. I got it. Now,
CS 418 _2.
Nah, quick.